We'll begin with the staff demographic record. The staff demographic file is essentially the counterpart to the SSID enrollment file in Fall 1, meaning this is the anchor file that allows you to submit subsequent reporting files for staff in Fall 2. If the SENR file attains ownership of a student for an LEA in Fall 1, the SDEM file attains LEA ownership of the staff that are reported in Fall 2. These are the notable points that we want to ensure that you understand with regards to the SDEM file. You'll need to coordinate with human resources and with school site staff in obtaining the relevant data for the SDEM file and ensuring an accurate data submission in CALPADS for Fall 2 more generally. Fall 2 includes only certificated staff active as of Census Day and course sections that are occurring on Census Day. Staff members no longer employed by your LEA must have their SDEM records exited in CALPADS. And this is why it's important to begin with some housekeeping by identifying staff members no longer employed at your LEA and properly exiting their SDEM records. And we'll go into more detail on what it means to properly exit an SDEM record on the next slide. And it has gotten easier to properly exit an SDEM record this academic year. So who should you report SDEM files for in Fall 2? LEA should report directly employed staff with a seed and report the credentials appropriate to their staff assignments. We'll cover more on who to report in detail in a few slides. We also have a few resources listed on this slide that will help you to determine who should be reported, who should not be reported, and how or where to search or acquire seeds. And then finally, all staff demographic records must have the LEA service years and total service years updated annually. You'll need to calculate and input these yearly totals into SDEM records in Fall 2. Total and LEA service years are used to determine inexperienced teachers in the CalSAS system in compliance with the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. All right, I mentioned that you must properly close SDEM records for all staff who are no longer employed by your LEA in Fall 2. And when closing the SDEM record, it's important to remember to populate the employment end date. The employment end date is the last date that a staff member was employed with an educational service institution. Formerly, the effective end date would be populated for demographic changes that require subsequent SDEM records to be reported, and these are changes in things like name or gender. However, beginning in the 24 to 25 academic year, LEAs are prevented from entering an effective end date, and it is now a null field, neither stored in CALPADS nor validated. This means that it is vital to close the SDEM records for all staff no longer employed by your LEA by populating the employment end date field of the SDEM record in Fall 2. Okay, so what staff do you report with SDEM records in Fall 2? LEA should report certificated employees employed in certificated positions in school districts, county offices of education, charter schools, schools administered by the Department of Corrections, Division of Juvenile Justice, or state special schools. Note that even if a given employee is on temporary leave, they should still be included, and we will discuss changes in reporting employees who are on leave in some slides here as well. LEA should report university interns or district interns authorized by the CTC and employed in certificated positions, again, in school districts, county offices of education, charter schools, schools administered by the Department of Corrections, Division of Juvenile Justice, or state special schools. LEAs should report non-certified instructors who are employed in charter schools and who are providing non-core, non-college prep instructional services and who have seeds. California Education Code now requires that all charter school teachers must obtain the certificate required for the teacher's certificated assignment by July 1st, 2025. In addition to this, Ed Code also required that by July 1st, 2020, all charter school teachers must have obtained a certificate of clearance and demonstrated their professional fitness. So all charter school teachers should have seeds, even if they are non-certificated. You should report non-certificated administrators in school districts or county offices of education working at the level of assistant, deputy, associate superintendent, or higher who have seeds. You should report non-certificated administrators in charter schools who have seeds. And then you should report substitute teachers, both long-term and short-term, as defined by individual school districts. You should report itinerant teachers teaching at multiple school sites within a district, and itinerant teachers may or may not be on the master schedule at a school site. You should report pull-out or push-in teachers, also known as resource teachers, who are teaching at multiple school sites or at one site. In general, these teachers are not on the master schedule. And then finally, you should report individuals on provisional internship permits, short-term staff permits, or teacher emergency permits. All right, this slide shows a screenshot of the SDEM record with key fields given an alphanumeric value. All staff members who are active during the Fall 2 submission need to have a staff demographic file with a record effective start date. That's the field labeled A on the screen here, on or prior to Census Day. The effective start date represents the date that the data in the record became effective. And there is a change this year regarding the record effective start date. Previously, LEAs were encouraged to update the SDEM record annually, but they did so inconsistently because there wasn't a validation that required it. While this might seem acceptable if there weren't changes to the record, two fields should be updated every year: the staff service years LEA and the staff service years total. And this is now even more important as these fields are used for teacher assignment monitoring, for the school accountability report card, for federal reporting, and for state plans. So if a staff member has a staff assignment record in the current academic year, it means that staff member is active. So if they have a qualifying staff assignment record this academic year, you will be required to add a new SDEM record with a start date that is on or before Census Day this academic year. All right, next, the staff information section of the SDEM record contains the statewide educator identifier, or SEED, in the field labeled B on screen here, which is required for all educators in public K-12 LEAs in California and is assigned by the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, or CTC. The SEED is required to submit staff data to CALPADS and required for course section records. SEEDs allow CALPADS to maintain data on individual educators over time. And you can only submit a staff demographic or a staff assignment record for an educator who has a SEED. If you're reporting a staff member that is employed by a third party, an ROP, or as a college instructor and they do not have a SEED, you will not be able to submit a staff demographic or a staff assignment record for those staff members. And then next, the highest degree code, or the degree status code, in the field labeled C on screen here, represents the highest academic degree that a given staff member has earned. The employment status code, in the field labeled D, is required for all teachers, but is optional for administrators and pupil services classifications. And the employment status code represents their current employment status at the LEA, whether probationary, temporary, tenured, or other. Next, the employment start date is key for determining if staff member can be included in the current reporting period. And the employment end date, the field labeled F here, is required for staff who are no longer employed by the LEA in order to exclude them from the SDEM submission or from the Fall 2 submission. And then all fields marked with an asterisk must be populated. And this means that all staff demographic records must have the staff service years LEA and the staff service years total updated annually. You'll need to manually include one additional year for your staff member if your staff member is returning. For returning staff, the staff service years should be one greater than last academic year. For new staff, it should be 1 year. The total service years is the total years that a staff member was credentialed or certificated and is used to calculate inexperienced teachers for federal purposes and on the California school dashboard. And again, the staff services years total will need to be manually entered as the total service years from last academic year plus 1 year. And what you populate in the SDEM record in various fields here are used in report 4.2, staff count and FTE by job classification, report 4.4, staff profile list, and report 4.3, staff teaching assignments. And that concludes our discussion of the SDEM file.